Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Wordfence Live. Today is September 15th. Thanks to everybody for getting here early. I saw we had over 250 in the chat hanging out, asking some questions. We really appreciate it. My name is Scott Miller. I'm a customer support engineer here at Wordfence, and in a few moments, I'm going to be joined by QA engineer and threat analyst Ram Gall, as well as threat analyst Chloe Chamberlain. We got a cool show lined up today. We're going to be talking about what attackers are doing on your compromised site or on compromised sites in general. We've seen, with the file manager vulnerability recently, a lot of sites being compromised. So we're going to give you an idea of what attackers are doing on these sites, whether it's a small site or a larger site. So we're going to be checking that out. I definitely urge you to stick around to the end of the show because we're going to be doing a quiz early on here, and we're going to be giving out some Wordfence swag, which we've been doing every few weeks here. So we're going to be putting a link into the chat, and that's going to be Tim Cantrell, our customer support lead, who's going to be putting that into chat. And if you can, click the link, go over, and you're going to want to guess what the most prevalent type of malware that we see on hacked sites is. So whenever you see that link posted, get over there quick and put your guess in. And then at the end of the show, we're going to be announcing the first 5 people who got that question right. And again, that is, based on what we're going to be talking about today with what attackers are doing on your site. The quiz question is, what is the most prevalent type of malware that we see on hacked sites? So make sure you stick around to the end of the show, and we're going to go over that. Before we get going, what do you need to know about what hackers are doing on your vulnerable site? So regularly we hear from Wordfence users asking why a hacker might be interested in a less significant site. So, my sites, I'll put up some test sites, some hobby sites, maybe a cat blog. Sally's cat blog is always under attack here on Wordfence Live. So you'll notice that hackers are still targeting you, even with a smaller site. So even if you think that it's insignificant, it's still very valuable to hackers. And there are things that they can do with your site that can be very profitable. And in order to understand how to protect your site and keep everything good and good security standing, you're going to want to understand the mind of a hacker. And that's why we always say here at Wordfence, you need to think like a hacker. So hackers are targeting all sites, and they can use a vulnerability to easily access these sites if everything isn't secure and up to date. Let us know where you're viewing from here. And I'm streaming from just south of the Pittsburgh area. Very nice day out here. Hopefully you can say the same from over there. We have we got viewers from Ireland here. It's nice to see. As I said, we had almost around 300 people before we got going. So thanks everybody who jumped over early and hung out with us, got your questions in. Tim is in the chat there to answer any questions that you have, and we'll do our best to answer those in the chat. And if we cannot, we'll answer some of them here on the show. So before we get started, remember we are going to have a quiz. I see some people mentioning the swag in the chat. So the quiz question, whenever you see the link there posted from Tim, what is the most prevalent type of malware that we see on hacked sites? And you're going to want to click on that and submit your guess here before we get started, because once we get started, we are going to close down the form. So we had some images sent in. Speaking of swag, we had some of our viewers send in some images, and hopefully we can put those on the screen from our previous swag giveaways. And hopefully if anybody here has won, see, we have admiration of the mug there. I have, thankfully I have one as well, and my cat hasn't broken it yet. So I try to keep an eye on it. If anybody wins the swag or has in the past, in recent weeks, feel free to send in some images, and would love to take a look. So as I mentioned, get your guess in. I see the link is being posted in the chat there. So we are broadcasting to YouTube here. So this is public. We ask that you don't share any sensitive or private information in the chat. We'll do our best to moderate that. But if you have anything sensitive or personal related to your site, maybe a compromise, feel free to send us a question in at feedback@wordfence.com and use the subject line Wordfence line. So as I mentioned, today we're going to be talking about what attackers are doing on compromised sites, how they're getting there, different methods they may use, and what is going on once they get in there. So without any more delay, let's bring in Chloe Chamberlain. What's up, Chloe?
Hi, how are you doing today, Scott?
Good, good. It looks like you're still in Maine. How's it going up there?
Yep. Yeah, it's going great. Still loving the weather and enjoying being here. We actually we went to the coast of Maine over the weekend and went to Acadia National Park and stuff, and it was really nice. I like being out in nature here.
What was the weather like over there during the weekend?
Beautiful. It was, I think I want to say 60s to 70s, if I'm not mistaken. Nice, breezy, cool. Oh, and at night where we were, we could see the Milky Way, and so that was like beautiful, and I enjoyed it very much.
I'm jealous.
Yeah.
I'm jealous. So before we jump into what we're going to talk about today, we're going to be talking about what attackers are doing on compromised sites. And you've dealt, a great deal with compromised sites as a site cleaner for a while. Could you give us just a brief overview of the site cleaning process, just as far as what steps are taking and maybe like a typical time frame for a normal cleaning, if there's a such thing, I guess, as a normal cleaning?
Yeah, so it's been a little while since I've been on the SST team, but when I was on the team, so it's your ticket, it starts out with pre-service. So basically you send us in your credentials for hosting, your WP admin, and everything like that. And we verify those credentials, make sure they work so that the analyst can get into the site, do the cleaning and everything. So once your credentials are verified, it's put into our queue. And that's when a site cleaner will pick up the case. And so the first thing we do is we just take a look at your website, see normal functionality, see how it works. If it's not inaccessible because of whatever malware you have on there. And so we get an idea of how it works to make sure that when we're done, we don't break anything and make sure everything's working normally. And then from there, so it's been a little while, so I'm a little rusty, but from there, we would back up everything. We would take a backup of your files, your database, anything that needs backed up, we back it up. And then we take a copy of your site and put it into our remotely hosted server area where we do our clean. So we take your site and we don't do it live on your site, but we do it away. So we don't damage anything while we're working or anything bad happens. And then we run scans, we manually sift through your files and try and make sure we find all the malware. We remove that malware, clean the files and everything. We re-archive those files that have been cleaned in the database that's been cleaned, and then take that back to your server, upload them to the server, and then we uncompress it. And once we're done decompressing it, we will swap it out. So we don't necessarily delete your site's files until we have successfully swapped things out, but we kind of isolate your infected files while we're doing that swap. And then once we're done with the swap, we will go ahead and make sure that Wordfence is installed. Your premium key that comes with the service is installed. We'll run a scan, make sure everything looks clean. We'll do just another quick run through to make sure everything's working properly and we don't see any malware. And then there's some post-action steps that we take in there. We'll make sure that your Google Search Console is clear. And I think there's other stuff, but I'm still rusty, so I don't remember exactly what the whole process is. But yeah, we do some steps after that, and then we'll compile our report, tell you what we found. Look at the logs. That's one thing. We try and figure out what exactly happened during the compromise. We'll take a look at your logs, any artifacts or anything that can help us determine what exactly happened, vulnerable plugins and things like that.
Of course.
And then we'll compile the report with some action steps to give you so that you can take the next steps to making sure that your site is secure. I think that's everything.
Yeah, as you mentioned, the intrusion vector, that's one of the most important things we're looking for there, just to help, because, and I bring this up because we've seen, influx with people who, might not have been using security when the file manager vulnerability hit. And unfortunately, that resulted in a large number of issues. So on that note, let's bring in QA engineer and threat analyst Ram Gall. How's it going over there, Ram?
Hi, it is very warm in Phoenix, and it probably will be for another month, at which point it'll abruptly become absolutely beautiful weather like Chloe's having in Maine.
So one of the things that has helped with, and we're going to talk about the file manager vulnerability here in a moment, one of the things that has helped with that is our premium feature, the real-time IP blacklist. Can you give us a little information on how that works, Ram?
Sure. So basically, we keep track of which sites on our network are getting attacked, and we basically compile the worst IPs that are attacking the most sites into a blacklist. Now, I use that term, but it's actually temporary. So over like any given 30-day period, we'll end up blocking over 200,000 IP addresses. But a lot of the time, it's because a device got infected. And someone runs antivirus on the device, it'll get cleaned up, it will stop attacking other sites, and we'll remove it from the blacklist. So yeah, on any given day, there will usually be about 20 to 35,000 IPs on there. But over the course of 30 days, we'll see over 200,000 IPs getting listed. We'll actually block I think this last month we blocked over 3.8 billion attacks. I mean, the vast majority of those are brute force attacks, where people are trying to basically guess username and password combinations. So, I mean, those overshadow even things like the file manager vulnerability, just because the sheer number of attacks they try is going to be massive, even if the number of sites they're actually hitting is comparable. But yeah, we block a truly staggering amount of attacks and from a truly staggering number of IPs.
Yeah, just going off that information, I'm extremely biased, working with Wordfence, but I always tell people that this, that feature alone in my mind is worth it for premium because, you don't have to maintain it. It's done for you, and the IPs are thrown onto the list and removed automatically whenever they stop being malicious. So it's just one of those great features that you put your license in and then it's good to go, and you're protected from a lot of IPs.
And I mean, it's good that we remove IPs from the list as soon as they stop attacking, but we'll also add new IPs to the list when those IPs start attacking. So if an attacker is switching it up, we'll still be able to block them.
We have a question: are they bots or human? It's both. I mean, these IPs, people switch very rapidly, bots and humans. So, they're blocked when we're seeing a large number of attempts, and
yeah, it's almost always
they're not.
It's almost always bots, to be perfectly honest. We'll occasionally see, a probing attack where maybe a human is, testing out a new vulnerability to see if it works. But once they've got that vulnerability set up the way they want it, they'll then use bots to massively attack, hundreds of thousands, millions of sites. Individually targeted sites are generally fairly rare, except as more or less a hacker learning experience.
Okay, let's. You and Chloe had both worked on the file manager vulnerability, and there was a lot of information we've put out on that. So maybe you two can jump into that. Let us know where we are currently with that, and just a little overview of what we've seen there with that issue.
Sure. So I think Chloe, we saw some of the earliest attacks were just a couple days before they started getting massively attacked. It looks like the attackers were starting to prototype it, like I was saying.
Yeah. Trying to get it all figured out.
Exactly.
You know what things are looking like today? I know you've been keeping a really close eye on everything that's been happening there.
Yeah, I mean, attacks on it are still up, but I guess it started out with people finding vulnerability in the basically it was the EL Finder module, right?
Yeah.
Uh, I guess people started attacking that for a few days before they realized, oh, hey, File Manager uses this. We can totally attack File Manager with this. And then all of a sudden we had a massive wave of attacks.
Yeah. Curious how they actually found it.
Yeah. I mean, probably the same way we do.
Yeah.
Now, how many different actors were using this at a large scale? Were there multiple?
A lot.
Oh, gosh. Oh, gosh. So when I last checked, there were like 200,000 IPs that were actually attacking this vulnerability. We've seen some of our old friends, including some attackers who were injecting malicious JavaScript into sites and were doing wide-scale attacks over the earlier course of the year. But those attackers weren't really the main actors in this. It looks like there were two main actors in this. One was we believe, Moroccan threat actor. I don't want to say single hacker, because when I say threat actor, it could be a person, it could be a group of people, it could be a syndicate, but they call themselves Baja attacks. And it was actually fairly interesting what they were doing. And they seem to be the threat actor that moved first at a large scale. The very first attacks we saw that from them, even the sort of like initial probing attacks, seemed to be them. And they basically password protected the vulnerable file so that none of the other threat actors could infect the site. Though I think they didn't start doing that until a little bit later. And then they would basically alter some of your core files to steal usernames and passwords of anyone who logged into the site. And especially if you had WooCommerce, like an e-commerce solution, they'd steal those usernames and passwords too, and they would use a Telegram bot to send it to their private Telegram channel. And my guess is they're probably reselling those credentials because, I mean, either you could sell it as just a username password combination that works, or they could even be selling the accounts where, hey, you can get free stuff on this site if you just use this other person's credentials.
Now, before we move on, we have a question, and this is a reminder. I don't know if you have a few seconds to get your guess in for our quiz. It may be closed. You may have a second to still put that in. It's the most prevalent type of malware that we find on hacked sites is the question. You can put your guess in. We had a question, though, with regard to the File Manager plugin. If we remove the plugin, is there a way to know if the site was compromised? And I know in our blog post we had some signs of a compromise there, so I'm not sure if you two off the top of your head want to bring anything up with regard to that. But definitely, if you still have that plugin on the site, make sure you're updated, and ideally you would probably want to remove it when you're not using it with plugins with that functionality. Is that safe to say?
Yes, as I understand it, there was an issue that some users had with updating the plugin. So I don't know if that's resolved yet. Removing it until you can get a known safe version of the plugin installed, and even then, you probably don't want to have it on your site unless you're actively using it. Is probably a good idea. As for knowing if the site was compromised, we do have we have malware signatures that detect it. I would hope that any other security scanners would also have malware signatures that detect the most prevalent infections that have been added via the File Manager vulnerability, but I know that we do at least. So yeah, scan your site with something. I would prefer that you scan it with Wordfence, but I might be a little biased.
Yeah.
Heath had asked what plugin we're talking about, and we're talking about the File Manager plugin that we've reported on over the past few weeks. So if you haven't seen that, check that out. Now, Ram, Chloe, kick us off here with, we're talking about what attackers are doing on your compromised site or on a compromised site in general, the motive. What's the first thing that we're seeing here with regard to that?
They want to make money.
Yeah.
Like, maybe not your money, but your visitors' money, or maybe they just want to sell something your site can do to other people to make money.
And your vector or your site can just be a vector to make money.
Exactly. Like, so individual hackers, yes, there probably are guys, in basements with hoodies, but like as a general rule, the ones that are actually massive attacking sites are probably guys in hoodies who work for organized crime syndicates.
Yeah.
So, and
Running bots
potentially
everywhere.
cats as well that might be hacking.
Yes.
Sally's cat blog gone rogue potentially. So one of the things that we see on these sites, Chloe, you've seen this a lot, Ram as well, backdoors. So that's the first thing we're going to talk about. What is a backdoor exactly?
I'll let Chloe handle this one.
Yeah. So a backdoor is essentially a backdoor into your site. So it's just a way for attackers, hackers, whatever you want to call them, to gain access into your site. So it's a way for them to typically execute commands or to establish a reverse shell, so they can navigate through your file system and again execute commands and stuff. These not often, I would say, but they can go undetected by malware scanners. They'll stay there when you've changed your passwords and things. So it's just a door essentially for an attacker or hacker to be able to access your site and run commands and do things. Yeah, does that explain it, Ram? Well,
I think so. I mean, like, yeah, it's pretty much any way that an attacker can make changes on your site that you didn't authorize, that, bypass normal ways of doing it. So, yeah.
Do you know where we find backdoors normally?
All over the place. Like, and I mean, there's something that, that attackers value, which is basically they want to maintain persistence. So they want to make sure that even if you upgrade to a version of, the plugin that's not vulnerable, they can get back in. Or even if you change your username and password, they want to be able to get back in. If they have persistence, then they can keep on doing whatever it is they want to their site. And if, they change their monetization strategy from, just SEO spam to something else, to like DDoS attacks, if they have a persistent backdoor, then they can still use your site for whatever they want to do next, instead of having to go through the trouble of rehacking it and hoping they can. Yeah. So
I think the theme editor is a common place where attackers will put backdoors. If you have that enabled, they'll use malicious JavaScripts to kind of inject a backdoor in there often, I think. And they'll also just upload files as part of like a malicious. So like with the file manager one, you uploaded arbitrary files. So an attacker might upload a backdoor, a PHP file. And I actually have a sample of a backdoor just to show you real quick, just simple, like what it does. So let me go ahead and share my screen real quick. Can you see that all right?
Yep.
Okay, so this is just a basic web shell, which is essentially a backdoor. And you can just execute. So if I type ls, it's going to list all the files. If I go ls .. it's going to list all the files above that. I can do other things like listing all the processes that are running. I can do things like make a new directory, like this, and then ls, and then you can see that I made that new directory. So a backdoor is basically a way for an attacker to do things on your server, on your site as the site user, basically. And so, yeah, it just makes it so if you change your password, you don't have a malware scanner running per se, but you've changed your password. They can't get in because you've changed your password, but they still have this backdoor there where they can do certain things and reinfect your site if you've cleaned it. So it's really important that you make sure you find these on your site and get them removed if you ever do get infected. And I do want to mention that sometimes developers can put backdoors on your site when they're developing something for you. So you want to make sure you run a scan to make sure that they haven't put any backdoors on your site that can like shut it off if something happens. For example, those are typically called maintenance hooks, I think. So that's one thing to just keep in mind, because not all hackers are guys in their basement with hoodies or nation state attackers and things. So it's just another scenario to keep in mind there. Let me stop my screen real quick.
Another thing to mention is we see these in null themes as well. Is that right?
Yes, null plugins and themes almost universally contain backdoors. If you're downloading that free plugin or theme, then, I mean, some null plugin and theme sites actually have it in their terms and conditions. It's like, hey, by downloading this, you acknowledge that we can go onto your site and change whatever we want to, whenever we want to. And that's, I mean, I don't really think I want to trust, that guy with a, website hosted in Turkey to do that unless, I know him.
Yeah, that's probably a good way to do it. Now, so that covers backdoors, and as we mentioned, according to our team, this is one of the more prevalent types of malware that we find on hack sites. Is that right?
Yeah, I as I understand it, from talking to the SST team and from actually looking at our own numbers, backdoors are probably going to be found alongside just about everything else, just because they're kind of not only a first step, but also once an attacker has gotten in, they'll want to maintain that persistence. Even if they change strategies and remove some of the other stuff they've added, they'll want to keep a backdoor or lots of backdoors. Like if you see one, chances are there is probably more, just in case the first one gets found.
Okay, so that about covers backdoors. Anything to add on that? And thankfully, the Wordfence firewall and scanner, it can find these for you. So if you're new to Wordfence, if you've just installed it, run a scan, run a high sensitivity scan if you're noticing issues on the site, and you may notice one of the results. Hopefully not, but it may mention backdoor directly, and then you can go from there. And we offer some guides on the site to help you clean those as well. And hopefully we can post a link to that in the chat. So anything to add on backdoors before we move on?
I think that covers it.
Yeah,
Okay,
there's way too much to actually go over.
Yeah, we would need a couple full hours for that. So
Yeah.
what else are they doing on the sites once they gain access and compromise these sites?
Defacements, which actually probably are the only kind of hacks that are still regularly done by dudes in hoodies and
Yeah.
potentially in basements.
I'd say a lot of script kiddies too.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
individual actors, they're one of the few hacks that are still done more by individual threat actors than by people trying to make money.
Yeah. And I'd also sometimes, so I don't know if this happens a lot in WordPress, but I've read about it and stuff. There's I would call them gray hat hackers, where they're somewhere in between. And they kind of deface your site just to tell you that you should take better care of your site. I don't know if you've heard of that at all, but I've read about it in some places.
I've actually seen a few of those where they'll be like, hey, you should update your site. We got in via this vulnerability. And I feel like it's still kind of the same thing as just a malicious attacker bragging. They're just trying to cover it with a thin veneer of, they're trying to cover it with a thin veneer of, respectability, because they're not actually doing responsible disclosure. If they have the power to deface something, they also have the power to, undo that defacement and contact the site owner. So, but people do it mostly for ego points or for showing off to other hackers. Though I guess sometimes they're also, they'll do it for political reasons or to embarrass the website owner. But the main thing about defacements is that they're the easiest way to find out that your site has been hacked. And so a lot of people think of a defacement when they think, oh no, my site has been hacked. But a lot of the time it won't actually be that obvious.
Yeah. What is a defacement? Did we cover that?
You should, you have a really good picture of a defacement. I'll let you handle this because it is the best defacement ever, and I would let my site be defaced by cool cats.
I would too. All right, let me go ahead and share my screen. Can you see that all right?
Yes, I can.
So basically, a defacement is when someone alters for the most part, the front-facing page of your site. So oftentimes it's going to be hacked by blah, 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 or whatever. In my example, it's been hacked by Cool Cats. Sally's blog, I think, was defaced at some point, and Cool Cats was the one that defaced it. So This is so much fun. But so defacement is basically just kind of changing the face of your site, and usually it's for bragging rights. So it's going to say the hack by. So like when people go to it, they're like, this was hacked by this person. Yeah, I think
Cool Cats is the #1 feline hacking group.
Yeah.
If they weren't before, they definitely are now. Yeah, so the defacement is, in comparison to a backdoor where, a visitor may very well not know in most cases that the site they're on is hacked. The defacement makes it completely and blatantly obvious. And then, otherwise you may have like a redirect that is sending you elsewhere as well. But the defacement is, as Chloe said, somebody bragging that they got into a site. So.
And I mean, one thing to bear in mind is just because you see a defacement doesn't mean that other damage wasn't done. Like I think we covered in one of our previous episodes, one of the larger scale attacks we had to deal with. They found out when their site was defaced, but a lot of customer data had already been exfiltrated by that point. So just because it's a defacement doesn't mean that there's not a secondary motive as well. It just means they're usually ready to, leave at that point.
We had a question from Linda asking if all sites are being attacked or if there is something that attracts, hackers or bots to a site.
Given the number of sites we've seen attacked for the file manager vulnerability, it really looks like they just have a list of WordPress sites. More sophisticated attackers may have done some earlier reconnaissance to find out which sites have which plugins, so they might actually have a smaller list to choose from. It's like, oh, hey, I've got a list of sites that have the file manager plugin. I'm just going to attack those. But most attackers are just going to be like, I have a list of, 10 million sites that I know are running WordPress, and I'm just going to, throw these attacks against the wall and see what sticks. So
now Chloe's having a couple connectivity issues. We brought up cats. It's possible that one of her cats is chewing through her network cables.
Her cat hacked her laptop. That is what happened. We know that, that cat, that was her cat in that picture, or one of her cats.
Very capable, I'm sure. So where are we at on defacement here? So did we go over defacement contest? That was something that I found interesting.
So I honestly, I didn't know that defacement contests talked about it, but I guess hackers will compete for notoriety by hacking as many sites as possible and placing defacements on those sites. And apparently they will tally up how many sites they have managed to successfully deface.
Okay, so yeah, like as you had said earlier, it's a lot of bragging rights whenever when you hack, any site that gets potentially more visitors, the better for these sorts of things when they're aiming at this and they can get their name out there that way.
I guess back when there was a REST API vulnerability back in an older version of WordPress, 4.7 and 4.71, defacements were really popular back then. And basically hackers or attackers could wipe out the page content and place whatever they want on your site. And I feel like that was one of the places where defacement contests were big. Defacements are not as common these days, from what I understand, but I think that is largely representative of the movement for most large-scale threat actors moving to monetization rather than just ego.
Now, as we're waiting to get Chloe back here, anything else to cover on defacement before we move on?
I think that's probably all that we can really talk about. We do have a question as to why a hacker would simply deface by putting a gibberish line scrolling across the site that doesn't take money or contact info. Again, it's largely ego. Possibly the gibberish line is, in fact, their hacker handle. It looks like gibberish, but it's their hacker handle. Or maybe that, they are known for doing that style of defacement. It's also possible that, they're just testing to see if they can. And so they're not necessarily trying to put any particular message on a site, but they only managed to do it once, and that was the message that ended up on the site. Or perhaps they'll try to run a full defacement, but they only managed to get part of the site defaced. I mean, there's a lot of potential reasons that could happen.
Now, more often than not, these attackers, they want to compromise a site or, more sites for, to make money from it. So that's why I think these situations like this are a little bit, odd whenever you see. And going off that question, you're wondering why somebody would put a message on a site and that be it, because more often than not, we see somebody wants to redirect a site or they want to gain from it a little more.
Yeah, honestly, I feel like defacements are increasingly rare. And like I said, I think it is mostly because there's a shift towards monetization. Most of the people who are acting at scale are trying to make money off of it. And I think Chloe's back. So, all right. Almost. There we go. Hi, Chloe. We covered the rest of defacements.
Awesome.
And I think we're ready for SEO spam, which is my favorite.
Sorry about that. So I have the one I'm using just ran out of 4G data, so I had to switch over to another one.
Oh, no.
So it wasn't the cat. We were speculating the cat might have hacked the computer.
Sorry about that.
Took you offline. Okay, so we have a little latency. We're back. So what do we got next here? We're looking at spam, right?
SEO spam is my favorite thing. Isn't that right?
Yeah.
So we're not talking about spam comments, which, is just when you have open comments.
So what's the difference between spam comments?
There we are. Chloe, we have some latency with you. Not sure if you're catching up or not. Looks to be a little bit frozen. Go ahead, Ram.
Oh, I think the cool cats are at it again. Anyways, so we're not talking about spam comments. We're talking about, things where, all of a sudden you'll do a Google search for your site and you'll see advertisements for, Air Jordans or, pharmaceutical spam. And basically what happens is that attackers have found ways to monetize this because the owners of those, sites, selling questionnaires, pharmaceutical sales, essay writing services are extremely common. Ringtones and musical downloads are common. Movie pirating download sites, online gambling, fake designer goods, weight loss supplements, and adult content. Basically anything that typical advertising providers are unable to or unwilling to advertise, you'll see a lot of SEO spam for. And basically the way it works is that an attacker will dump a bunch of pages containing largely gibberish keywords about, the topic, like, pharmaceutical sites or essay writing, and they'll link back to whichever site is paying to have their services advertised, basically to boost their search engine ranking. Because if you put your site's links on a bunch of different websites and they're all, referring to your website as the source for, essay writing sales, and all of a sudden your essay writing sketchy website will be boosted in Google.
And these are much, much more common. We see this much more frequently than defacement.
Definitely. These are not the most common or most prolific or most widespread of attacks, but as far as just the sheer variety of different, variations, spam definitely takes the cake. We've got, one of our detection signatures literally detects more than 1.5 million different variants of a given spam, a given, spam page. So, yeah.
And now, so that talks about, we've seen, redirects to the pharmacy, the movie downloads, online casino gambling. That's something that we see regularly. What about spam pages?
So spam pages are basically what I was covering earlier. It's not just links. I guess we can sort of differentiate between spam links and spam pages. Spam links are just, someone adds a link to their, adult gambling site in the footer of your theme, and that gives them some SEO capability. Spam pages are more what I was talking about earlier, where they'll actually add like a separate web page to a portion of your site that is mostly a bunch of sort of randomly generated gibberish keywords. I don't know if you've ever seen those, like before GPT-3, the like weird AI generated text that sounds kind of not quite right. A lot of spam pages will kind of look like that, and they'll just kind of have keywords for whatever it is they're selling peppered throughout and linking back to their page.
Now, we had a question going back to what we just discussed. Susan asked, how does SEO or spam work? Where are the hackers putting that text?
If it's not on an individual page, if it's an individual page, chances are it's probably in a subfolder on your site with a, again, nonsense gibberish name like QXRYZTJ or something like that, and that'll just be, you know, chock full of spam pages. If they're just injecting spam links onto your site, and we see this with a lot of sites advertising knockoff sports jerseys, a lot of the time they'll just add them to your theme's footer. Or a lot of the time, if you get a nulled theme in addition to containing backdoors, or sometimes instead of containing backdoors, the nulled theme will include links in the header or footer to spam sites.
Now, with spam pages, we often see that older domain names are, attractive for these sorts of attacks, or .edu domains. Is that right?
Well, yeah. Part of that is just the SEO algorithm tends to reward domains that have been around longer than domains that are brand new, especially domains that are generally, considered reputable, like .edu domains, where there is more of a rigorous process involved in getting one. So they do get targeted. Sorry, go on. Also, if you see like massive 2 or 3 or 5 megabyte sitemaps in a folder on your site, or like collections of these enormous sitemaps on your site, that's a pretty sure sign that you've got a spam infection. Those usually are basically sitemaps linking to either spam pages on your site or spam pages on someone else's site.
How big is a normal sitemap going to be in general?
Maybe like 10 kilobytes.
Okay. Yeah,
like
so that's something good to take a look at then.
If you see one or more sitemaps that's like, bigger than like an MP3 file, then maybe that's a problem.
Another thing to look for, strange names for spam pages, maybe full of directories and other spam pages. So, just kind of piggyback on top of each other, and it just keeps growing. And that's also, as you mentioned, these older domain names, more established, potentially more value there, I guess, for something like that. We had a comment, edu domains, sometimes easy targets because a lot of stuff gets forgotten or abandoned as well.
Yes.
That's a good point.
Oh, yes. Though, I mean, most of them, a lot of edu sites aren't necessarily running WordPress, and the ones that are usually running in a subfolder or on a separate server, basically, that gets assigned a subfolder or subdomain. And those are usually the places that are kept more up to date. So.
Okay, now PHP Mailers, next on the list here.
Oh, it looks like we forgot to mention the Japanese keyword hack. I may have sort of brought this up, where if you do like a Google search for your site, actually that's something that I recommend everyone do to like find out if there's SEO spam on your site, because if it's working, if the SEO spam is working, you'll see the signs of it. Though it does take, a while to go away after a site is clean, but Google your own site, see what pops up, especially if you see like a bunch of Japanese text. If your site is not actually a .jp or a site intended to market to an audience in Japan, you might have been hit with a SEO spam attack.
And those that could load your homepage if there's things embedded into your homepage, or alternatively another page that was built out with spam in it. Is that right?
That's right. And now
ideally,
we can get on
you would want that to load a 404, ideally, after you clean that out. And that could take a couple weeks then, I believe, for Google to crawl the site and really correct that.
Yep. So, and now we should get on to mailers, because I'm sorry, I just realized that I'd forgotten about the SEO spam, but
So what is a PHP mailer?
So a PHP mailer is basically, you know how WordPress can send you emails to like reset your password, or when someone logs in, or if you have Wordfence installed, we will send you emails from your site telling you if something weird is going on. Well, most websites have the ability to send email, and attackers who like to make money off of sending spam would like to be able to send email from an IP that has not been blacklisted yet. So if they can get a PHP mailer on your site, they can use your site to send spam or phishing emails. And your site still has a good reputation until it starts sending out a bunch of spam or phishing. So, yeah.
Now, site owners, how do they learn typically that their site's infected with something like this?
Usually they will find out when when their site tries to send email, and they'll get a bounce back, or their host will let them know, or their host will shut them down. We also Wordfence does come with a feature that monitors your site's IP to find out if it is on any of these spam or phishing blacklists, and to find out if it has been sending out spam messages. So the good news is you'll probably find out. The bad news is by then your life will be more trouble. So.
Yeah, and also, right around that point, as you said, the hosting provider may be shutting down the site in order to, protect their reputation and their IPs at that point.
Exactly.
Well.
Exactly.
So why would attackers use hack sites to send out spam mail?
Well, like I said, most reputable email service providers are not going to let you send spam, or at least not in large quantities before they shut you down. But if a hacker, has a backdoor or a bunch of mailers on, thousands of sites, they can just keep sending the spam or phishing emails on each one of those sites until they get shut down, and they can get a lot more messages out that way than they could almost any other way for cheaper.
1 second here. So, and that goes back to what we talked about, like, depending on what kind of site you're running, you might be wondering, why am I being attacked? I think that's safe to say, if an attacker or a hacker gains access to your site, that's exactly why an insignificant site can be important to an attacker, because they can use it to send out these spam mailings, and it's another resource for an attacker in that case, and it makes it easy sometimes. So there's just some general things. You want to keep everything up to date, make sure that you're not giving easy access here. So definitely something to consider.
Yeah, and I mean, spam mail kind of like ties into the next thing I wanted to cover, which was phishing. So phishing is where it's basically a form of social engineering. And basically that's where you're impersonating someone trusted in order to gain their confidence and do malicious things with that confidence. So phishing, and it often happens via email, but not always. Sometimes, people will send a link via some other channel. But basically, it's usually an attempt to get sensitive information, such as usernames, passwords, or credit card information. And basically, an attacker will somehow try and get you to visit a link to some sort of site that claims to be, your bank, or Dropbox, or DHL or something, and try to enter in a username or password to some sort of service. Or credit card information, which they can then steal and resell or reuse in other attacks. And that is the most dangerous thing about phishing, is that information gathered in phishing can be used in other attacks, because chances are you're using the same username and password combination for other things. And attackers will sometimes try and host phishing pages on your site. Your site has a clean reputation. So if a site gets a phishing kit installed, it won't be blacklisted yet. You can get a victim to visit it. They won't get any warnings other than noticing that, hey, this is not actually bankofamerica.com, but not everyone looks at that. And they'll enter their login information, and then an attacker has a new set of credentials to play with.
So what are some things to look for, just briefly, with phishing? You're looking for spelling mistakes, anything that doesn't look in place. If you're getting emails that may be phishing.
I feel like for certain kinds of phishing that for mass spam that's the case. But I feel like modern phishing attacks, and especially spear phishing attacks, which are targeted at specific people, those are a lot less likely to have mistakes. Those are a lot more likely to be convincing, and that's one of the reasons why it's often safest to basically, if you get an email from your bank, you should probably manually visit your bank's website and log in rather than clicking the link.
Yeah,
And
if somebody's spear phishing, they've already put in a great deal of time to, to make it accurate and convincing. So spelling mistakes.
As I
and
understand it, phishing was responsible for a large majority of data breaches over the past year. I don't know if we have time to go into that right now, but yes, take phishing seriously. If you get an email that looks suspicious or a text message that looks suspicious with a link, and you are even a little bit unsure about it, manually visit that site and try to figure out what's going on.
Now, did we cover malicious redirects? I know we talked about it briefly earlier.
We haven't gone into that during this session, and I'm not going to spend too much time on it because one of our last items is actually really interesting and ties everything together. But we have talked about it in the past. Basically, malicious redirect is usually a JavaScript that an attacker will insert on your site. And a lot of the time they'll be super sneaky and they'll check to see if you're a logged in user on that site or if you're an administrator on that site. And if you are, they won't redirect you. So it takes longer for you to find out. But anyone else who visits your site will then be redirected to, a malicious site. It's actually a similar thing to the SEO spam, except it's driving traffic directly to, a site selling something, marginally legal, or, an online gambling site, or even a site that's, intended to, like a phishing site, or a site that's intended to get you to download fake antivirus. Those are very popular. They're like security alert from Microsoft, or, fake Flash players. A lot of the time the goal is either to drive traffic to someone who's paying for it, just because they want traffic, or to drive traffic to a site that gets you to download more malware so that they can then take over your personal computer.
Okay. And, for anybody who joined late, we're talking about what attackers are doing on your site if they have it compromised, or in sites in general. So, malicious redirects, backdoors, spam mailing. What about a botnet or command and control?
So I feel like this is actually the one that ties it all together. And I feel like if there's no other takeaways than this is the one that's actually important. This is the reason attackers add backdoors to your site. Like, you might think of an attacker adding like a full-featured web shell that lets them like click around and explore your site. And for targeted attacks, that's true. But a lot of backdoors are basically specifically designed to interact with the attacker's own servers, and the attacker will have a list of all the sites they've infected on their server, and they'll send commands to all of those sites simultaneously as to what they want them to do. This is actually something that we have seen with the File Manager vulnerability. They'll password protect vulnerable files. They'll password protect their own backdoors that they've added. And then the botnet will send out commands to all the sites that they have infected saying, okay, I want you all to update the password because someone has figured it out. Okay, I want you all to send mass emails. And basically, once an attacker has a botnet, they can, they can do any of the things we've mentioned before. They can, sell SEO spam. They can go on the dark web and advertise, hey, I've got 10,000 sites under my control if you want to do SEO spam on those. Or they can say, I've got 10,000 sites under my control. They can, send out attacks against other sites to, do a denial of service attack. Or even they can use those 10,000 sites as a deniable way to take over more sites.
And you may have mentioned, but sometimes they keep these compromised sites inactive until they're ready to activate the site and use it. And if you're interested in more information on these botnet attacks, I urge you to go over to the wordfence.com blog, and you can search botnet there. And we've had numerous articles over the past few years that discuss this. Yeah,
if you ever see us using the word CNC or C2, that stands for command and control. Basically, once an attacker has a botnet, they can make money on it however they want, because it's basically like, owning 10,000 servers that they can just sell for whatever purposes. So
now, before we jump over to the winners of the quiz and talk about a few other things, the last thing we're going to talk about is cryptomining. And this is, one of those examples that we had mentioned, sometimes it's for profit. It seems more often than not, there's a profit to be made somewhere along the line, with the exception of the defacement. And this is one of those cases. So what is cryptomining, Ram?
So I think most people on here are fairly familiar with the idea of what cryptocurrency is. Basically electronic money that's basically generated by making computers do math. But the thing about that is that if you can attack a site, or you can take over 10,000 sites, then you can get all 10,000 of those sites to do the math and earn you more cryptocurrency, or earn you more money. So that's one form factor of it, is they'll actually just run the crypto miners on the servers of the sites they've infected. Another format, which is less popular since CoinHive went out of business, which is basically an attacker could place a JavaScript on your site, and that way it would mine cryptocurrency using all of your visitors' computers, which is kind of even more insidious. And there were a number of supposedly legitimate plugins on the WordPress repository that actually got pulled for that behavior, and some of them got shut down permanently. Some of them, decided that they were going to play by the rules and just stop doing that. But yeah, it sort of went out of popularity when cryptocurrency lost some value for a while, but now that it's going up again, I do expect that we'll start seeing it more frequently.
Now, what's going to be the biggest sign if somebody's suspecting maybe that they're being attacked like this?
Your site might be really slow. That's probably the only way to really find out. Depending if it's a JavaScript-based crypto miner, an external scan might find it. And then your visitors might complain that your site is really slow. If it's on your server itself, then your hosting will probably tell you that you're using way more resources than you should be. So,
okay, so before we announce the winners of our quiz, anything else to go over here, Ram, that you want to add?
I think we wanted to cover credit card skimmers for e-commerce solutions a bit. We don't have a lot of time, but the good news is that the primary WordPress e-commerce solution is WooCommerce, and most of the most popular payment gateways for WooCommerce handle PCI compliance for you, which means that there are only a very few skimmers that will work. On other solutions, a skimmer might sit on your server and steal the information that your users send over, but for the PCI compliant gateways, the customer's never actually sending the information to your server itself. So the only way that an attacker could actually skim that information is by basically using a keylogger, which will likely have to run in JavaScript. So, and that'll usually exfiltrate payment information immediately, which is also bad, but those are, again, a little harder to pull off. So yeah.
Speaking of these, yeah, it does. And speaking of these, it just reminded me, we had talked about this briefly on the podcast here at Wordfence, Think Like a Hacker. So if you're interested in that, we have a 5 to 10 minute format where you can get a good update of the week's stories security wise and around the web and with WordPress in general. And I believe it was 2 weeks ago we talked about credit card skimmers, and Visa had an alert out for that with some information, some good information there. So take a look at that. Now, I believe Sean is going to put our winners of the contest below.
Right.
And that will be helpful because I apologize in advance if I mispronounce anybody's name here. So we have a few that guessed right. Good job to everybody. So we have Suresh Ramasamy was one. Minyarzi Sydney Chinsvedi. Does that sound about right, Ram?
I believe so, yes. I'm excited for all you guys because our swag is really good.
It is. Also, we had Eric win. There was no last name given, so congratulations, Eric, there. That was Eric with a K. We had Carol Gann, Jim Varone, and Martin Bergeron. So go ahead, Ram.
Oh, no.
Probably better pronunciation than me.
Uh,
We had so that's good to see, and like we showed earlier, the winners of prior weeks of the swag sent in some pictures. We urge you to do that if you'd like, and we can throw it on the stream at any given point, and we would love to see that. So yeah, there we go.
Hey, see, I told you our swag was good. Look at that awesome mug and the really cool Moleskine notebook. I guarantee no actual moles were harmed in the creation of this Moleskine notebook.
I always take a handful of them after the WordCamps because it's always nice to have a notebook and a coffee mug, really. So it's tough to beat. So anything to add before we head out here, Ram? Anything else?
Well, if you like the video, I want you to give it a thumbs up, please. And if you want to see more videos like this, subscribe to our channel so that you can watch us talk about hacking stuff.
Yeah. Additionally, Fast or Slow. It's a new service that we have out there. You can go to fastorslow.com. And this was built by our engineers. You can Tim will put a link in the chat, hopefully there. And it's a website profiling tool. Ram spent time doing QA on this. He knows how powerful it is. It's a global performance monitoring solution.
It is very powerful. It looks like we forgot to say what the actual correct answer was when we announced the winners. So, Scott, you want to announce the answer?
Sure. It was backdoors. It was the first thing that we had covered there. So, what are the attackers? What's the most prevalent thing that the most prevalent type of malware that we are seeing on hacked sites? And that turned out to be backdoors there, which can gain a lot of functionality for a hacker. I knew I forgot something. That's why I always like to ask about 5 times, before we close out, because it's only a matter of time before I forget something. So as Ram was saying, fastorslow.com, very powerful. Go over and put your site in there. Any site that you have, throw it in fastorslow.com. Get a good idea of how your site is measuring up for your visitors. And what their experience is like. Also, open.film is a film that we produced here. It's about the WordPress community. We interview a bunch of cool people, very cool atmosphere. If you've never been to a WordCamp or if you want to go to a WordCamp, it gives you an idea of the people that are involved in WordPress. And it's, having gone to just a few WordCamps myself, it was the way the vibe of the film and the atmosphere of it was really nice. So go over to open.film. It's a short film, just over 10 minutes, and check that out. Really cool to see. We also have a weekly podcast I mentioned. It's called Think Like a Hacker. It's produced by the wonderful people here at Wordfence, and we cover just general news that we find over the week. It's in a 5 to 10 minute format, so you can listen to it. It's not too taxing, just a brief overview of the news. So you can check that out. That's at the bottom of the wordfence.com page in the footer. You can also go to wordfence.com/podcast. The last thing to check out is the mailing list. And the mailing list, whether you're on the free or premium version, it may be the first place that you hear of something new coming out, a new vulnerability that you need to be aware of. And thankfully, with Wordfence, especially if you're a premium user, you are protected. If you're a free user, definitely subscribe to the mailing list, because that will let you know that you need to get something updated or uninstall a plugin, so on and so forth. So I think that about wraps it up, Ram, huh?
Yeah, I was going to say, if you got something out of this, let us know in chat while you still can. And we appreciate all of your views.
As Ram said, like the video here. It means a lot to us. It lets us know that you want this sort of content going forward. Also, if you're on the YouTube channel there, hit the subscribe button for us, and you can hit the bell. We go live every Tuesday at 12 Eastern time, which is 9 a.m. Pacific time. Yep. And it's typically every Tuesday. We're always covering something new. and trying to get some best security practices out there. You can support us by purchasing Wordfence Premium and getting that real-time IP blacklist that Ram talked about earlier. It's $99 for one site, and you also protect your staging domains as well. So,
and we also get you fresh firewall rules and malware detection signatures right when we release them rather than 30 days later.
Yep, and we are doing that a lot. If you're subscribed to the mailing list and checking out the blog, you're seeing the kind of work that Chloe and Ram and the rest of the threat intel team is doing. So thank you, Susan, for saying great show. We appreciate everybody for sticking around. We appreciate everybody who came over early and hung out in the chat with Tim. Until next week, I hope you have a good rest of the week, and I hope everything goes well, and we'll catch you on Tuesday. We appreciate it, everybody. Have a good one.